The entire restaurant went silent when the shy waitress suddenly raised her hands and began signing to the billionaire's mother. Nobody at the table understood what was happening. The manager looked horrified, the other servers stopped moving, and the billionaire himself stared at the young woman as though she had just revealed a secret nobody was supposed to know. Then his mother's eyes filled with tears, and what happened next changed the lives of everyone in that room. If you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. It was a bright Saturday afternoon when 24-year-old Alara Wynn walked into the elegant Belmont House restaurant for her shift. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, reflecting softly from the polished tables and crystal glasses. Alara had worked there for only 3 months, and even after all that time, she still felt nervous whenever she walked through the grand dining room. She was quiet by nature, the kind of person who apologized when someone else bumped into her. Her dark brown hair was always tied into a neat low ponytail, and she wore the restaurant's simple white shirt, black vest, and apron with careful pride. She had taken the job because her younger brother needed school supplies and their small apartment depended on every paycheck. Alara never complained about being tired. She simply worked harder. That afternoon, the restaurant received an important reservation. The name on the booking made the manager check the table twice. Cashin Vale, a billionaire known for his technology company, had arrived with his mother, Maribel Vale. Cashin was 32, serious, impeccably dressed, and famous for rarely showing emotion in public. His mother, however, was very different. Maribel was an elegant 68-year-old woman with silver hair, kind eyes, and a graceful smile. She was deaf and communicated primarily through sign language and written notes. Cashin had arranged for a private table near the window so his mother could enjoy the afternoon without being surrounded by too much noise and movement. Alara was not supposed to serve them. Their table belonged to another waitress, but everything changed when that waitress suddenly became overwhelmed by a large group arriving at the same time. The manager hurried toward Alara and told her to take the Vale table. Alara swallowed her nervousness and walked over with a menu in her hands. Cashin immediately began speaking while facing his mother, trying to explain the menu through gestures. Maribel smiled patiently, but it was obvious she was struggling to understand what he was trying to communicate. Cashin looked frustrated with himself, not with her. He knew some basic signs, but he was far from fluent. Alara placed the menus on the table. Then something unexpected happened. She looked directly at Maribel and slowly raised her hands. Maribel froze. Alara signed a simple greeting. Maribel's expression changed instantly. She answered in sign language. Cashin stared. The manager, standing several feet away, nearly dropped the order pad in his hand. Alara explained through signs that she had learned sign language when she was 16 because her favorite teacher had a deaf daughter. She had never expected that skill to become important in a restaurant. She asked Maribel what she would like to eat, and Maribel's face brightened as she signed her answer. For the first time that afternoon, Cashin relaxed. He watched his mother laugh quietly while communicating with Alara, and something inside him seemed to soften. His mother had spent years becoming increasingly isolated because strangers often became uncomfortable when they could not communicate with her. Some people simply spoke louder, as though volume could solve everything. Others avoided looking at her altogether. Cashin had spent years trying to protect her, but he had never realized how lonely that protection had become. Alara did not treat Maribel like someone who needed pity. She simply treated her like a person who deserved to be heard. The lunch continued peacefully until the restaurant manager approached the table with an uncomfortable expression. He quietly asked Alara to step away. In the hallway, he whispered that she should not have used sign language during service because the restaurant followed a strict professional protocol for high-profile guests. Alara tried to explain that Maribel had been happy, but the manager insisted that she should simply have written everything down. Alara lowered her eyes and apologized. She returned to the table. But Cashin had seen everything. He looked at the manager and calmly asked what had happened. The manager immediately tried to explain that Alara had crossed a professional boundary. Cashin said nothing. He looked at his mother. Maribel reached for a small notepad, wrote something quickly, and showed it to her son. Cashin read the words. Then he looked toward Alara. His voice became unusually quiet as he explained that his mother had written that Alara was the first server in months who had made her feel completely included. Alara stood frozen. The manager's face turned pale. Cashin then asked his mother another question through his imperfect signs. Maribel smiled and nodded. She wanted Alara to stay. So Alara stayed. The meal continued, and for the next hour, the table became the warmest place in the entire restaurant. Maribel told Alara through signs about her childhood, her love of gardens, and her habit of collecting old postcards. Alara shared small pieces of her own life, including how much she loved her younger brother and how hard she was trying to save enough money for his education. Cashin listened. He had entered the restaurant expecting another formal family lunch. Instead, he was learning things about his mother that he had not heard in years. Near the end of the meal, Maribel reached into her handbag and removed a small photograph. It showed her standing beside Cashin when he was a little boy. She pointed at the photograph, then at Cashin. Alara smiled. Cashin looked away for a moment. His mother had always been his greatest source of strength, but after his father died, Cashin had become obsessed with business. He believed that if he worked enough, earned enough, and controlled enough, he could protect everyone he loved from ever suffering again. But sitting there, watching his mother communicate freely with a young waitress, he realized something painful. He had given her comfort. But he had forgotten to give her connection. When the bill arrived, Cashin paid without hesitation. Then he asked to speak with Alara privately. Alara immediately worried that she had done something wrong. Instead, Cashin thanked her. He told her that he had never seen his mother so happy during a restaurant meal. Alara smiled shyly and said she had only done what anyone should do when they realized someone was being left out. Cashin looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked why she seemed so surprised that kindness mattered. Alara hesitated. She finally admitted that people often ignored quiet people because they assumed quietness meant weakness. Cashin nodded. He understood that sentence more than she realized. Before leaving, Maribel called Alara back to the table. She took Alara's hands gently and signed slowly. "Thank you for seeing me." Alara's eyes filled with tears. She signed back that Maribel had made her feel seen too. Cashin watched them, and his eyes became wet. He quickly turned away, but his mother noticed. She smiled. That afternoon, Cashin left the restaurant with his mother, but he did not forget Alara. The next morning, the manager received a call from Cashin's office. At first, everyone assumed Alara was going to receive a complaint. Instead, Cashin had arranged something completely different. He offered the restaurant funding to create an accessibility program that would provide sign language training for staff and improve communication options for deaf and hard of hearing guests. He also asked whether Alara would be willing to help develop the training because she understood something money could not buy. She understood empathy. Alara accepted. Within months, the restaurant changed. Staff members learned basic signs. Menus became more accessible. Guests who once felt uncomfortable asking for help began returning regularly. But Cashin did something even more meaningful. He created a scholarship in his mother's name for young people who wanted to study communication and accessibility services. Alara became one of the first people to help with the program. Maribel visited the restaurant several times afterward. Every time she entered, Alara greeted her with a smile and a familiar movement of her hands. And every time, Maribel smiled back. One afternoon, months after that first meeting, Alara received a small envelope from Cashin. Inside was a handwritten note from Maribel. It said that years earlier, she had started believing the world was becoming smaller because fewer people took the time to communicate with her. But one shy waitress had reminded her that the world was not becoming smaller. Sometimes people simply needed someone willing to reach across the silence. Elara cried when she read it. Cashin stood nearby and told her that his mother had asked him to give her one more message. Elara looked up. Maribel had written, "Never become less kind just because the world does not always notice." Those words stayed with Elara. She had spent years believing that being quiet meant being invisible. Now she understood something different. You did not need to be the loudest person in the room to make a difference. Sometimes the smallest gesture could reach someone nobody else could reach. Sometimes a pair of hands could say what thousands of words could not. And sometimes the person who believes they have nothing special to offer is carrying exactly the gift someone else has been waiting for. If this story touched your heart, please support it by liking the video, sharing it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribing to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may need a little hope today. And before the story ends, leave a comment saying, "Kindness can cross every barrier," if you believe that one simple act of compassion can change someone's life. That Saturday afternoon, Elara thought she was simply walking into work. She had no idea she would meet a woman who needed to be heard, a son who needed to understand his mother, and a family whose idea of connection would change forever. The restaurant eventually became quieter as evening approached. Sunlight still poured through the windows, touching the empty tables and polished glasses. Maribel stood near the entrance beside Cashin. Before leaving, she turned around. She raised her hands. Elara smiled and answered. No microphone was needed. No speech was necessary. For a few quiet seconds, the entire room understood the message. Everyone deserves to be heard. And sometimes, kindness begins when one person simply takes the time to listen.